Mr. Lee is a construction photographer. He lives in Seoul. In his spare time, he enjoys video games, caffeinated beverages, studying languages, and practicing walking on water. This man's employer documents large-scale construction sites in Seoul after recording the demolition of the blocks that came down to make space for them. For the last 4 years, Mr. Lee has been assigned to a building site in Seoul's Yongsan district, the geographic center of the city. The 22-story building is in the shape of a cube, with 3 smaller cubes carved out of it, to allow light, air, dust, rain, dried leaves, birds, their discarded feathers, flies, bees, and dragons to pass through. When I say smaller cubes, I'm thinking of an average 5-story Berlin dwelling where I'm sitting in at the moment. This is an office building for a cosmetics corporation and the new workplace for its 3,000 employees. The building contains around 10,000 seats, chairs, benches, sofas, and stools, each employee having 3.3 places to sit on. Some even have a 4th chair, if we don't count the security personnel who stand for the duration of their shifts. Before the cube arrived, the employees worked in a building that stood in the same spot. That other building was perhaps the size of the 3 smaller cube buildings combined, maybe a bit larger. Mr. Lee never saw this building. It was gone before he started. Today, Mr. Lee concludes his 4-year field work on this site, more precisely his commute to this address, which he does daily, except on Sundays and the occasional Saturday. The subway station where he gets off is in the building's basement. If you turn this basement upside down, it is the height of a tall building in Berlin, only it's underground. His duties on the job included planting stop-motion cameras in areas with the most construction work. Concrete slabs, cranes, and welding sparkles were involved. He documented minor building activities, like the fitting of doorknobs and the planting of saplings in the gardens where the 5-story phantom buildings were cut out from. He would fly his drone once a month to see the progress of the construction. He crashed 4 of these flying eyes in his attempts to see the building. They were insured, of course, and could be replaced by newer models no less. The height limit of his flights was 200 meters, and he was always accompanied by a US Army officer who would make sure Mr. Lee would not turn his curious eye to the Army base next door or the rooftops of the neighboring towers, every one of them taller than the cube and equipped with snipers in helicopter landing pads. Tomorrow, he will hand over his access card, as his services are no longer needed here. His contract ends this afternoon. Mr. Lee has decided to take one final look to make sure he hasn't missed anything. During his whole time here, he's been thinking about capturing one iconic shot of the building to make a name for himself. He was here nearly from the beginning, before tourists started taking pictures of the building from a nearby mountain, and before they bought the latest postcards of the city, which from now on will include this cube with its 3 carved-out eye sockets looking back at them. In architecture school, Mr. Lee was taught that story is an obstacle when thinking about architecture, a distraction from the very structures that allow those human activities to happen. To play God, one has to think bigger than the individual and their spilled bowl of soup, he was told. In the same school, though, it was pointed out to him that literature and cinema make spaces into what they are. Films especially, bringing them out of anonymity, sometimes even making them into stars. Mr. Lee is at a loss whether his iconic shot needs a plot or is better off without one. After listening to his musings on the building and its images one evening, over that one last drink that happened too often after work, Mr. Lee's boss declared that iconic buildings are the main organs of the city. They are the arm, the nose, the eye, the knee, the toe. They are rarely mixed up and are immediately recognizable, unless seen by a cubist painter or approached by a trickster, an anarchist, a non-believer, and. The boss said all of this to make a point, that the cube doesn't need help becoming visible. It is just too big to hide. Mr. Lee, however, gives this question regular thought. No harm comes out of imagining the famous shot. Maybe one day he gets to shoot it too. His thoughts always take him to the office environment first. Theater productivity, money to be made, misplaced ambitions, a workplace romance, a shy smile, a secret kiss. His mind then turns to darker ideas. Espionage, contagion, a zombie apocalypse, secrets of the world. Villain's remorse, snail's fat, volcano's ashes, spider's venom, horse's laughter. All those nutrients that are good for you. Caskets of hibernating bodies, cure for death. An important meeting is in progress. A tall figure in a raincoat, smoking a pipe leisurely. A dubious female character, a bullet flying. Line of superheroes riding the escalators looking for a victim to save. A place of vertigo. Time of despair. Hope. Epiphany round the clock. His attention often goes back to those office corners where marriage proposals are compared. Breakups, heartaches, headaches, painkillers. End of the day. Beginning of another one. Smell of tea, leftover food. Getting fired. A promotion just in time. All those 10,000 seats. Mr. Lee replays memorable scenes from the movies that he has seen. In his reruns, the cube has mysteriously made it inside those pictures. His fantasies usually happen in the future. In one, the cube is a spaceship. Another has to do with explosions, dust rising from a place where the building once was. In his favorite films, entire city blocks are built to be blown up, stepped on, and turned to rubble by a carefully placed detonator, a Godzilla, or a King Kong. For a while he thought about bringing animals to the building's foyer. Noah's Ark afloat once again before the end of time. This foyer is another place in the cube where the whole building, the size of the one I am inside, has gone missing. He also thought of bringing rare mountain birds to the gardens for a scene. This scene could show the birds making home in these raised gardens, filling in for all those mountains that humans have sanded down. Mr. Lee has been fighting the urge to bring in skateboarders, the other prime users of contemporary building blocks. They keep coming back in slow-motion staircase scenarios like a bad dream. Lean and rosy-cheeked, they seemed to be the connoisseurs of edges and curves. The cube appears in his dreams too. Once he saw it expanding in all 6 directions. Once it was levitating. Once it flew away. He writes these dreams down like the rest of his ideas. He listens to conversations in the building carefully, quietly. Someone commented on the bare walls recently, calling them without makeup, but still desirable. Another time, a municipal inspector said that before the cube changed the face of the city, the cosmetics being tested here had for years, slowly, methodically, changed the complexion of the city's inhabitants. Mr. Lee keeps a list of overheard metaphors. The building as a tree. The building once a child, now grown up, leaving home. The building as a boat thrown into the water for the first time to see if it sails. The building as a dinner table, with a long preparation behind it, waiting for the guests to arrive. Sometimes he thinks the cube can be a film set for anything and nothing. This thought bothers him. This thought doesn't help with his break from anonymity. This thought reminds him of the shots that he's been filming for his company this past month for their final report on the end of the construction and the start of the use of the building. Endless sequences of electricians checking all the light switches one last time. The cleaners scrubbing the newly finished surfaces. The movers moving boxes. He finds these activities tedious and far from photogenic. While he waits for his next assignment, a new construction site some blocks away, these thoughts swirl around in his head, in no particular order, arriving at no useful conclusion. He tries reaching his boss to meet for a drink to talk about the future. Actually, he's hoping to test his latest ideas on him. The boss takes his time to respond, and when he does reply, he writes, "We are passing ships tonight."